Today's class is called Mobilize Your Ankles. So we'll be adding some extra ankle mobility into our yoga flow. Our ankles are really important to keep mobile. What happens if we lose our ankle mobility is that works its way up to the knee and the hip. It's called moving up and down the chain. So if you have any imbalances, maybe differences from side to side, my left ankle has a little less mobility than my right, which leads all the way up to my left hip not being able to flex as easily as my right. So it's something I'm always trying to work on to kind of even out those imbalances. So today we're going to be doing some plantar flexion, dorsiflexion, and just a little bit of circling to really get those ankles moving. And we're going to start in bridge pose. Coming onto your back, check your triple S, feel the back of your skull, your shoulder blades, and your sacrum on the mat. We can bring our hands to our thighs if you can reach, and really press into your thighs, squeeze your glutes, lift up into a low bridge, really keeping the activity in the glutes, checking that neutral pelvis. We want to make sure it's not tipping forward or back, chin is toward the throat. Really hold this neutral pelvis, and we're going to try and lift the heels up, pressing into the toes without anything moving, and then lower down. Lift the heels, press into the toes, lower down. Really draw those pelvic points in, lift the heels, lower down. One more, lift the heels, lower down. Now we're going to drive the heels down and see if we can lift the toes up. So that's dorsiflexing, and then lower the toes. Good, drive those heels down into the mat, lift the toes, lower down. Hold that firmness in the glutes, lift the toes. Lower down, one more, lift the toes. So we're dorsiflexing the ankles, lower down, and then with control, lower slowly until the sacrum comes down. Interlace your hands behind your head. Draw your elbows in. Check that we're not popping the ribs. Big inhale here. Exhale, curl up off your shoulder blades. Tuck your chin towards your throat. Look at those two pelvic points and really imagine that they could draw closer together. Inhale to lower. Exhale, lift up off your shoulder blades. Draw those pelvic points in. So similar to what we did in bridge, we're going to keep the heels down. Try to lift your right toes up, dorsiflexing that right ankle. Lower down. Lift your left toes, keeping that left heel down. Lower the left toes. Inhale to lower. Exhale, lift up, chin towards your throat. Draw those pelvic points in. Keep the heels down. Lift just the left toes. Lower down. Lift the right toes. Lower down. Inhale to lower. Exhale, curl up off your shoulder blades. Tuck your chin towards your throat. This time we'll try to keep both heels down. Lift your right and left toes. Lower down, inhale to lower. Adding on a little bit, exhale as you lift up. Look at your belly button. Imagine it drawing down toward the mat. Press into the heels, lift the toes. Lower down, now we'll try to lift just the heels. Lower the heels, inhale, lower. One more time. Exhale, curl up, chin towards your throat, belly button draws down. We'll start with the heels this time, so press into the toes, lift the heels up, lower down, press into the heels, lift the toes, lower the toes, inhale to lower. Good, release your arms. We'll come onto quadruped. Taking a few rounds of cat-cow to stretch out your back, warming it up for some movement. Come to that neutral spine. We're going to try and tuck our toes under as much as you can. And then try to shift the hips back to whatever degree feels okay on the feet. And just try a few rocks here. So we're really trying to tuck the toes under as far as possible. Rocking forward and back. So we're kind of just stretching out the tops of the feet around the toes. Moving as far as you want. See what feels okay in the feet. Good. Keep tucking the toes under. We're going to lift for down dog. Walk the feet in. Really keep the weight in your hands. Lift your hip creases up. So we're going to start by just doing some heel lifts here. Pressing into the toes. Lift the heels. Lower down. Lift the heels. Lower down. Do a few more. Lifting and lowering. Keep the arms nice and strong. Lift your front ribs up towards your back body. And then we'll pedal the feet out. So we'll bend one knee at a time as we lift the heel. Walking the feet out. Again, keep that lift in the hip creases. Keep lifting your front ribs up. Settle in your downward dog, and we'll walk the hands back toward the feet. So right away as you walk back into the happy squat, our heels will lower down as we hinge at the hips. So knee, ankle, and hip flexion all really go together. So we need to be able to dorsiflex our ankles when we hinge at the hips. So we're going to be working on that today. Check and make sure the toes are down, the heels are down, and then rise to stand. Walk to the top of your mat. We're going to practice a few of those hip hinges before we start our flow. So again, the ability to flex at the ankles really affects what happens in the knees and the hips. So we're going to start with the hands at the sides of the pelvis. Really press into the big toes and the heels. Hinge at your hips. So we're going to check the knees, make sure they're not further forward than the toes. That wouldn't be dorsiflexing the ankles. So to dorsiflex, we need to make sure the heels stay down. And we're going to bring the hands to the thighs and slide them down as far as you can, going a little bit further into this hip hinge. But we need to make sure the heels stay down. If our heels are lifted, we're not getting as much of that dorsiflexion. And then slide back up. Good. Hinge at your hips. Hands slide down the thighs as far as possible. Checking to make sure the feet are really planted down, pressing into the toes and heels. Good, come back up. Use your glutes to help. Hinge at your hips. Check that the feet are still in that flexed position, pressing into the toes and heels. Use your glutes to rise back up to stand. We'll do one more like that, practicing this very functional, simple hip hinge, checking that we're flexing at the ankles, knees, and hips. Good, reach the arms forward and up. Lift your shoulder blades up. Exhale, hinge at the hips. Just like that hip hinge we practiced, check where the knees end up. Step to your plank pose. Knees can be up or down in your plank. Lift your throat. Draw those pelvic points in. Lower your knees. You can untuck the toes. Lower the rest of the way with control, keeping the head of your arm bones away from the ground so they don't drop forward. Chin will come towards your throat. Lift your belly button away from the ground and start to draw your shoulder blades together for this low cobra, squeezing your glutes. Tuck your toes, lift back to quadruped. Step your right foot through, left knee can stay down, toes can be untucked. Lift up, check that upright pelvis. Make sure it's not tipping forward or back. Draw those pelvic points in. We're gonna reach the arms up. Lift the shoulder blades up toward the ears and squeeze this left glute. You can pause here, or if you'd like, try to lift that right heel, pressing into the big toe. Lower down. Keep this upward lift in the upper body. Lift the heel. Lower down. Lift the heel. Lower down. Lift the heel. Lower down. Lift the heel, lower down. Lower the hands, step that right foot back in. Left foot steps through, low lunge. Check that pelvic bowl, zipper that pubic bone up, squeeze that right glute. Lift your arms up. Lift your shoulder blades up toward the ears. Hold that neutral pelvis. You can stay here or try to lift the left heel, pressing into the big toe. Lower down. Lift the heel, lower down, squeeze that right glute, lift the left heel, lower down, lift the left heel, lower down, lift the heel, lower down. Lower the hands, step it back to quadruped. You can either stretch it out in cat-cow, you can go to child's pose, or you can come to downward dog. If you're in downward dog and you'd like to add a little bit more of that heel lift here, or pedaling the feet out, see what feels best. Focus on your breath. Walk your feet up towards your hands. We're gonna end in that hip hinge forward fold. So again, check what the ankles are doing. Knees are over the ankles. Feet are down in that dorsiflexed position. Press into your feet, rise to stand. Lift your shoulder blades up. Sit back into the hips. Check that triple flexion, ankles, knees, and hips. Step back to plank. Lift your throat. Draw your pelvic points in, squeeze your glutes. Lower your knees, you can untuck the toes. Lift the throat again, zipper that pubic bone up. Exhale to lower with control. Keep the top of your shoulders away from the ground. Chin towards your throat. Lift your low belly, squeeze your glutes as you draw the chest through the hands, low cobra. Lift back to quadruped. Right foot will step through. This time we'll tuck the left toes for low lunge, really pressing into that left big toe. We're gonna rest the hands on this right thigh, squeeze the left glute. Now we're gonna try to drive that right heel down and lift the right toes up, so they might not go very far. Lower the toes. Try to lift the toes, pressing into that right heel. Lower the toes. So we're working that dorsiflexion here. Lift the toes, lower the toes. 2 more, lift the toes, lower the toes, lift the toes, lower the toes. We're gonna lower the hands. You can come onto your fingertips or all the way to the palms if that's available. Swing this left foot over toward the side of the mat, and we're gonna rock forward and back here. So we're stretching this right groin, right inner thigh area, but as we rock forward, make sure this right heel stays down. So again, we're stretching into that dorsiflexed position. Maybe getting a stretch in the Achilles. So we're letting the knee go over the toes here because we're working that ankle mobility, stretching into that range of motion for dorsiflexion. Good. Swing that left foot back around, step it back to quadruped. Left foot steps through. Tuck the right toes. Low lunge, check that upright pelvis. Shoulders are right over the pelvis. Hands will rest on that left thigh. Try to lift the left toes up, drive that left heel down, and then lower the toes. Lift the left toes, working the front of the foot, front of the ankle, lower down. Lift the left toes, coming into that dorsiflexed position. Lower down, keep squeezing the right glute. Lift the left toes, lower down, lift the toes, lower down, lift the toes, lower down. Lower the hands, maybe onto the fingertips or palms. Swing that right foot around toward the side of the mat. We're gonna add this rocking here. So again, it's kind of 2 things in one. We're stretching that left groin, left inner thigh, and stretching this left ankle, maybe the left Achilles at the back of the foot, coming up to the calf. As we work our way into this dorsiflexion, letting the knee drive forward over the toes as much as it feels good. And really just pay attention to that left heel staying down on the ground. Swing that right foot back around. Left hand comes back to the outside. Step it back. You can take cat-cow, child's pose, or downward dog. Again, if you're in down dog, add any movements that work the ankle. You can lift and lower your heels. You can pedal the feet out. Bend your knees, walk your feet forward. As you sit back into the hips for that bent knee forward fold, check your feet. Press into the big toes, press into the heels. Knees are over the ankle. Rise to stand. Lift your shoulder blades up. Release your arms down. Bring your hands to the sides of your pelvis, right around your ilium, and just squeeze your hands together. Make sure that we're standing in that mountain pose posture with the shoulders over the pelvis. We're gonna press into our big toes, lifting the heels, and try to lower slowly for 3, 2, 1. Lift the heels, press into the big toes. Lower slowly for 3, 2, 1. Lift the heels, press into the big toes. Hold that neutral pelvis. Lower for 3, 2, 1. Lift the heels, press into the big toes. Lower for 3, 2, 1. Get those heels down. One more. Lift the heels, press into the big toes. Lower for 3, 2, 1. We're going to keep the hands at the sides of the pelvis. Right foot will step back, high lunge. Bend both knees, making sure we're not spilling that pelvis forward. Really zipper up your pubic bone towards your belly button. Now you can stay here or you can hinge forward. So if you're hinging forward, we're flexing at the left hip, our front leg. So our left hip crease is going to move backwards. So just like that hip hinging forward fold, our happy squat, that triple flexion, we're doing the same triple flexion here. Make sure your left heel is down, left toes are down, knee is over that left ankle. So they all work together. Ankle, knee, and hip. Good, lift back up if you were in that tilted lunge, and we'll turn toward the side of the mat for a side lunge. We're only gonna move to our right side, so we're gonna bend into the right knee, find that right hip crease where your right thigh meets your right hip, and move that hip back. So we're really flexing that right hip now. Just like that happy squat, check that the right knee is over the ankle. Press that right heel down, press the right toes down. We're gonna squeeze this right glute in order to straighten the leg and stand back up. Same thing, side lunge just to the right. Sit that right hip crease back. Check that triple flexion on the right side. Flexing at the hip, the knee, the ankle. Press into that right foot. Use your glute to come back up. Side lunge again. Hinge at that right hip. Press into the foot. Lift back up. One more. We're going to hold this side lunge to the right. Check that the right knee is over the ankle, not further than the toes. Check the pelvis here. Make sure it's not tipping forward or back. If this feels like plenty, stick with this. If you want, you can lift up your left toes, externally rotate the hip a little bit. So if this is too much on the inner thigh, you can lower that left foot down and bring it back to that parallel position, or hold here, maybe dorsiflexing the left foot. Lower that left foot back down, press into your right foot, rise to stand. Step it back to the top of the mat. Other side, high lunge, left foot steps back. Bend both knees, check that upright pelvis, shoulders stack over the pelvis. Stay here or hinge forward. Anytime you hinge, we're not gonna let the knee go forward. The movement has to start at the hip, so our right hip needs to move backwards so that the right knee is over the ankle. Check that you're really dorsiflexing that right foot. So pressing the heel down, keeping the toes down, lifting the belly, working that right glute. Lift back up, and we'll turn toward the side of the mat. Parallel both feet. Now we're just going to side lunge to the left. So we'll bend that left knee, find your left hip crease where the left thigh meets the left hip, move that hip crease back. So again, we don't want to start by just bending the knee forward. We have to move from the hip first. So the hip moves backwards, which bends the knee, making sure it's just about over the ankle. Let's squeeze the front and back of the pelvis with the hands, holding it neutral. press into that left foot. Use the left glute as you straighten the leg back to standing. Side lunge to the left. Move the hips back first. Check that the knee ends up over the ankle. Press into that left foot. Rise to stand. Side lunge to the left. Think about that broom behind your back. Really flexing that left foot. Straighten. Hold this time. Side lunge to the left. Stick with this if this feels like plenty of a stretch. Or you can lift up the right toes, dorsiflexing that right foot. But if that feels like a little too much sensation in the inner thigh, parallel that right foot down again. Good, keep hinging at that left hip. So left hip crease moves back. Plant that right foot back down. Use your left glute to straighten the leg. Step it back to the top of the mat. Coming to chair pose, we'll bring hands to front and back of the pelvis. Just like our happy squat, hinge at the hips. So hips move back, not knees forward. So we bend the knees, but we move the hip creases back. Again, checking to make sure knees end up over the ankles. We're gonna add a little bit of that movement with the feet here. So hold that neutral pelvis. Try not to round your back. Think about that broom behind your back. Lifting the right heel. Lower down. Keep flexing or hinging at the hips. Lift the left heel. Lower down. Lift the right heel. Lower down. Lift the left heel. Lower down, and really focus on getting the heel back down all the way so that we're really in that dorsiflexed position, working that triple flexion of the ankle, knees, and hips. Good, rise to stand, release your arms. We're gonna come back to our mat, coming back down, checking that triple S. Extend your right leg up any amount. It doesn't need to be straight. We want to feel a gentle stretch. So if it's more bent, that's fine. Wherever you're feeling a gentle stretch, we're going to slowly point the toes. That's plantar flexion. And then dorsiflex, we should know that by now, pulling the toes back toward the shin. Plantar flex, point the toes. Dorsiflex. 2 more, point the toes. Flex the foot. Notice where you feel a stretch. Point the toes. Flex. Hug your knee in toward your chest. You can grab onto the shin. And we're going to try to make some circles here. So really make these circles as big as you can in both directions. Noticing any difference in how the ankle feels now. Might feel a little bit tired or worked. And then we'll flex it again. So in that dorsiflex position, cross it over the left thigh. Take whatever option for your figure 4 feels good. You can stay here. You can lift that left foot up. You can keep your hands on your body, or you can goalpost your arms. If it feels good, add a little bit of that rocking side to side. Release that left foot down. Then the right foot will switch sides. Left leg extends up any amount. It does not need to be straight. It can be more diagonal, wherever you're starting to feel a stretch behind that left leg. And again, slowly transition from this pointed position of the foot to this flexed position. So we just want to notice any sensation when we plantar flex, pointing the toes, and dorsiflex, pulling the toes back toward the shin. You might feel a difference in the foot, the calf, the hamstring. Hug that left knee in. If it feels good, you can grab the shin and circle both directions with this left ankle. Just taking note of how the ankle feels Maybe it's the most attention you've ever paid to your ankles. But ankles are really important for keeping the knees and the hips healthy. So give them some love. Flex that left foot, cross your left ankle over the right thigh. Stay here. Maybe pick up the right foot. Maybe goalpost your arms. And try to slow your breath down. If it feels good, you can gently rock side to side. Release that right foot down and the left. Coming into Shavasana, take any option that feels good as you lie on your back. You can keep the knees bent. You can have the legs extended out. Let your arms rest anywhere you'd like. Closing your eyes. Take a few deep breaths to settle into this position. Soften your forehead. Relax your jaw. Stay in your Shavasana as long as you'd like.